Mid-2671, Slipspace Transit. Captain O'Brien, 4th ODR Battalion, Raptor Company. Surrounded by a small handful of familiar faces, O'Brien had found himself in another briefing involving another holographic tactical display with the likeness of a vibrant green planet floating above the table. While it seemed like yesterday he was on Mars, had found that 2 weeks had already gone by after waking from cryo. Beside him, his squad leaders sat silently as a man of a fair complexion spoke on matters involving the green orb. Low-Tech is a topographical mess, and unless you have a working relay planet side, you won't be able to get much beside basic topographical data. We can try and get closer, but we risk being noticed by ground forces, if they have any amount of an early warning detection system, let alone AA batteries. The man before him was donned in the new naval attire, but unlike Zuna, who wore a waistskirt down past her knees, his reached to the middle of his thighs. He sported the same 3 equally medium-sized inverted blue chevrons with a gold star above it, indicating his rank as a commander, with his name tape revealing him as Knight. He continued, "Once we're within range, we should be able to get better surveillance over the target area. Counselor Yorla reports that due to the nature of the planet's mountains, it runs a mess of surface sensors, which is good for our pilots to navigate. We'll be able to provide a waypoint, so it should pose little issue for extraction. Any questions?" His entourage of ship's personnel kept silent, as they didn't actually have much to do, especially in the field. They only handled issues aboard their ship, which he was more than fine with, and all he had to worry about was whether if he had a hot meal and a shower. But before Knight could dismiss them, Strega raised her hand. "I'm not sure if we covered this, but what exactly is the mission?" The briefing so far was a breakdown of the planet, and little was actually discussed pertaining to what they were supposed to do. Not wanting to leave a stone unturned, the commander replied, "Not long ago, we've received a tasking from FleetCom, a request from the new counselor, Yorla Vale. We're to assess the situation on planets close to Sela and determine if it's salvageable. FleetCom has also authorized the onload of several guests for the sake of negotiations. They'll also act as Celian Council liaisons, which is why we're porting at Altea before we enter Sela. But if all things go sideways, our guests are to recite a final rite for those your captain deems as enemies of both parties. He has final authorization. Sound good?" He finished, causing Strega to nod, implying she understood. "If there's no other questions, stand by. We're due to port in several days, so take this time to stretch your legs." As the commander reported, it really was just several days of travel to Altea since the briefing, and O'Brien and a handful of raiders stood by the airlock as the ship began its docking sequence. It was with a muffled clang of metal and mechanized gears that the doors opened with a whir, revealing a quiet station, light with pedestrian traffic and minimal noise. Instead of the gray interiors of a military installation, they were met with decorated beige-colored walls accented with navy blue trim. They exited the airlock, passing through a checkpoint that led into a larger hall that offered a larger headspace, illuminated with visuals of clear blue skies, just like on the world below. Strega breathed a sigh of relief on the station, even with her helmet still on. "It's like I never left," she said, nudging Dare, who nodded in response. "You think the orphanage is still running?" "I think so. I still receive letters from them," she answered, and presented an image taken from her personal data pad. It was a collection of children standing before a wall of photos and trophies, with Dare and Strega pictured above them. "Are those photos from—" he began, but was cut off by a now hyperactive Strega. "Yep, taken during my electronics scrimmage and your shooting competition. It was the first time we brought first place home that Sister Andrea thought we stole them," she said, this time with a tone of reminiscence as she returned the device to her hip. "Looks like the new kids came home with more trophies." O'Brien could tell that she shared a fondness for the institution, but couldn't say the same for Dare, who only nodded as she recalled their time before joining. Seeing that it wasn't often they came home, he offered a solution for the time they were here. "The XO authorized liberty for our time here. Said they had some things to prepare, so once our shift is done, you'll all have a chance to go planetside. The posture and expression of his detail were now more energized at the mention of being back on solid ground, even if for a little. As a result, their attitudes shifted, more attuned to their job as they went to meet with their new guests, which was located in the station's Uniformed Members Lounge, also known as the UML. Upon being greeted by its entrance, they noted the similar design language that was shared with all UMLs abroad, as a central location for traveling service members of the TRSC to get discounted service and a place to rest free of charge. It was decorated with the colors and insignias of the TRSC branches, which was a beacon of light for many. They entered, their weapons held in a relaxed state, and were greeted by the lounge's receptionist. "Good morning," began the woman. "I take it you're all on duty?" O'Brien nodded. "We're supposed to escort guests to our ship, Celians." However, her countenance was unfazed at the mention, seemingly adjusted to the new species. "Of course. May I have your rank, name, service tag, and the ship you are attached to?" "Captain O'Brien 0144560130, assigned to the TRSC Reaper's approach," he answered curtly. She tapped away on her display, which lit up at each key press upon the transparent medium before replying. "Orders are confirmed, Captain. The Celians are awaiting you in the main lounge. You can't miss them." Curious to her carefree disposition, O'Brien felt compelled to ask of her why she was unfazed by their presence, especially with how much their story is still being circulated by major news networks. He was sure that there was going to be mass outrage against them, but felt relieved that wasn't the case. "Well, I wasn't so keen at first, but a couple of them began to take classes for Republic citizenship, and I just got to know them from there. They don't seem bad, just another case of caught in the middle," she said softly. "I suppose that's true," he replied. "Met a few of them myself, so I can't help but agree somewhat." The receptionist offered a slight bend at the waist as they continued to the central lounge area, where there was a small collection of neatly dressed Celians donned in similarly styled Navy uniforms. The females were wrapped with the longer skirt that draped just past their knees, with the only two males present wearing the shortened version. In total, there were only 5 of them, and upon seeing his detail, stood to attention and rendered a salute, which he promptly denied. "We're indoors, so there's no need to salute," he began as he began scanning each one of their facial features. Just as he was met with before, they were each unique in how their markings developed to accent their varying shades of pinks and blues. Along with their exotically colored eyes, each had a vibrant ring on the edge of their iris that separated from the darkened sclera of their eyes. If his heart wasn't already set, he could have fallen for their eyes alone, with his gaze resting on a familiar face. Her skin was a pastel pink with magenta markings, and pomegranate-colored eyes with a yellow ring on its edge. She wore a head covering that covered most of her hair, which had 5 strings of silver leaves that came together at her forehead, and in the center of her ears were a pair of onyx-colored earrings. He recalled briefly of the time of when he met the individual in question, before speaking her name softly. "Vorta." She stiffened to the call of her name, but upon seeing the print presented below his chin in off-white, had lowered her posture to one of familiarity. "Lieutenant O'Brien?" she replied, with him giving a shallow nod in her direction. "Captain now," he corrected before turning to the rest of the Celian entourage. "It's good to see you doing well, but I'm supposed to bring you all along, so let me see proper documents before we proceed." "Oh, right, of course," she replied dejectedly. They did as he ordered, offering bundles of paper documents in addition to their common access device, which held their personal information. As he searched through them, Strega scanned their devices for their individual encryption keys that proved they were who they were. Encryption keys were difficult to manufacture without the base code for it, and it was something the Republic guarded closely, punishing harshly those who lose it, simply for the ramifications for displacing it. Most ensured it was safely guarded at all times. Finishing up, O'Brien addressed the Celians as he motioned for them to follow. "Documents look good. Let's go." It was soon after their departure of the lounge that the halls began to fill with the crew of the Reaper, when his side was occupied by Vorta. She tried her best to keep up, and against the recommendation of her peers, attempted to strike conversation. "I like the new armor. I think it suits you," she commented. Humoring her, O'Brien replied, "Thanks, but I have to say, didn't think a Sellian would wear a sailor's uniform so soon." "Oh, it looks good, right?" she teased. "It's surprisingly comfy." Without moving his head, peered in her direction, and noticed her newly exemplified figure. He couldn't argue that the uniform fit well for many, as his first thoughts were of the commander who captained a battlecruiser of the Fourth Fleet. Of course, that was a subject he kept quietly to himself. "I think it's a nice change of pace. Looks better than the old one, in my opinion," he said, with a vagueness as they continued to the ship. Seemingly satisfied, Vorta returned to the group and began humming as they passed through the checkpoint to their docking tube. It was after passing the gate that they were met by Commander Knight, flanked by 2 security officers. "O'Brien, thanks for escorting them. I take it you'll finish patrol?" He nodded. "It's only for a couple more hours. Once we're done, we're considering visiting planet side. Perhaps get a taste of some real food before we head out for who knows how long." Knight gave a hearty laugh. "Sounds like a plan. I myself will also see about taking the elevator down. I heard Altea has some premium steak dishes," he mentioned before Strega chimed in with a suggestion. "Then you should try Artel's Grill House. Best grill house this side of the Republic Arm," she added. "Oh, you've been?" "Born and raised. Held a party there right before shipping to the depot," she answered. "Then we'll give it a try," Knight said, turning back to O'Brien. "I'll send you the details later. In the meantime, enjoy yourselves." O'Brien nodded, sending off the small group of Sellians with a 1 from his detail to send them to their rooms. Looking upon them as they walked, noticed the single inverted chevrons with a star above, indicating they were all commissioned officers. He chuckled at the thought, returning to his patrol until they were relieved. Seeing this stop as their last sign of reprieve did wonders for his psyche, as it most likely did for the others before they entered a weapon engagement zone, where the only rules that mattered were survival. It was when he took this time to think, viewing the planet below from the observation lounge, that he was once again met with Vorta, still in her naval uniform. She placed herself close enough that she didn't have to raise her voice to be heard, speaking to the helmetless O'Brien. "Is it fine if we talk?" she suggested softly, to which he nodded silently. "Sure. What about?" She shifted in her seat as she tried to find her words, anxiety overtaking her. "I'm supposed to be on an expedition soon, and I wonder what I should learn not to be a burden." Her question had come out of the blue, as it was a subject he didn't expect of her. He envisioned that she would, at least, have been relegated to a role in the safety and confines of the ship. She continued, "That night, when you saved me, I felt nothing but helpless." She then turned, facing him with a look of conviction. "So, I'm wondering if you can teach me how to shoot." He wasn't against the idea of having another person in the field who knew how to handle a weapon, even if it was purely for self-defense, and having already shared a modicum of history with her, felt somewhat at ease with her presence. However, her request had thrown him off guard, finding it to a topic most random for her as an individual. However, he agreed, "It's not a bad idea. Better you learn now than to accidentally put one in your own foot because of a lack of training. It's late now, but there's a range we can hit tomorrow if you're willing." She nodded passionately to his response. "Of course, I look forward to it." But as he was about to depart, she called to him once more. "If you're not too busy, would you like to get some dinner? Maybe teach me some of the basics before we do the real thing?" He could tell that she was nervous in asking him, and seeing that he was still in uniform, was restricted to mingling with officers in an official capacity, barring him from eating with his troops. Of course, that was in public spaces, since officers and enlisted had separate halls to eat in. But more often than not, he would score large amounts of food for his troops, effectively making it a party at the very least, which was allowed under specific squad morale pretenses. Taking this opportunity to end his day, he obliged her. "Sure, you pick. I'm up for anything," he answered, of which her ears visibly began to twitch up and down. "That's great," she said happily. "There's a late-night shop not far from here that makes delicious noodle bowls." Instead of taking this time to worry about the future, he decided to take the present as it came, living it day by day, and sometimes bullet by bullet. With a universe awake and alive with other intelligent beings, he wasn't sure how many days he would have to be free from worry in the battlefield. As their journey ahead, them was sure to be fraught with ever-changing danger within an evolving, hostile environment. But with his pride as a warrior, he almost yearned for it. With the lives taken from their homes, forsaken to a fate unknown to him, he was ready to mount unto them the fury of the Republic.